What's up, you rascals? Andrew Cooper here in the house, and it's Coop's Fantasy Football Fiasco. This is an important one. As I mentioned on Twitter, we're taking 2 week break off the Friday show, not the Wednesday show. We're going to keep drafting best ball drafts every Wednesday with guests with Howard Bender, but I got to buckle down and get this draft guide done. So Howard likes to chain me to the desk, lock me up for a bit. That's what we're doing. So we're going to stick with best ball. We're going to talk about Dynasty today. We're going to go into the cave, get that draft guide done, and then it's going to be all 2024 moving forward, right? Obviously, in the Discord, we'll answer your Dynasty questions, all that. So still, but moving forward, we're focused on this year. Today, I just want to make sure I gave everybody an opportunity to come in, ask any questions that you have about Dynasty and your Dynasty team and your direction. And I'm also just going to lay out a basic roadmap here because one thing that teams don't really get, that owners don't really lean into, is that there's only two directions in Dynasty. I don't want to hear about productive struggle and that kind of nonsense. You're playing to win or you're playing for the future. If you're doing a productive struggle or whatever you want to call it, you're playing for the future, right? And if you're in a productive struggle and you think you might have a chance to win, well, you still got to know who the targets are, the win now players, so that if you do start hot and you start 7-0, you can trade for these guys and try and win right now. The worst thing you can do in your dynasty league is come in sixth place or fifth place, right? It doesn't matter unless it's some weird rules where sixth place gets money or third place gets some really nice payout. Like there's winners, there's one winner, and everybody else loses, right? And the people that lose the worst are the people that are in the middle and just end up with a middle of the pack draft pick, right? So what I'm going to do today is just talk about how to categorize these players, right? Who the guys to target now are, who the studs are for the future, and kind of who the stashes are. And then you can think about your team and where you are and decide what direction to go, right? So that's the game plan today. Thanks everybody who's joining the chat. If you're watching on Twitter, that's cool too. But if you want to support us, go over to YouTube, hit that like and subscribe. Really helps out, right? So honestly, what I'm going to talk about first, let's look at the young. There's one category of player that I call the young studs here that are guys that no matter what, you're keeping them. Whether you're playing for the future or whether you're playing for now, if you have these guys, you build around them, right? You don't trade them away. You don't sell and cash out on a Justin Jefferson, right? You hopefully, if you're playing for the future, he doesn't just drag your team to like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 wins and hurt your draft picks. But you want to hold on to as many of these guys as possible. So for me, guys that I consider young studs, and again, it depends on the position because at quarterback and tight end, if a guy is 26 or so years old, he's still fairly young and he's got a lot of good ball left. If he's 26 and he's a running back, well, he's already at the top of the age apex and he's no longer really a young stud. So for me, like running backs, for instance, 25 and under, guys that are 25 and under and that can start in your lineup right now. These guys are like Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Brees Hall. I would put Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne in there as well. And then after that, you got to decide if you like these players or not. But there's guys like Rashad White and James Cook and Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Pacheco, Kyron Williams, right? There's a difference between guys that you like and don't, or just trading away because you don't like them. But those guys all fit into that young stud group. Where if you like them, don't trade them away. Like you shouldn't look at Jonathan Taylor and say, "Oh, I got to trade him away because I might not be competing this year." Because he's still going to be good for at least next year, probably year after, probably next 4. Honestly, a player like that until he's 28, 29, he's got ball left. He's 25 right now. So guys like that fall in that category. At quarterback, it's pretty easy. And especially in Superflex, it's like if you have Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Mahomes, Stroud, Lamar Jackson, Burrow, Kyler Murray, I put in this group, like you just hold on to them. They're too valuable in Superflex, and they have so many years left. Like you trade away Patrick Mahomes, he's still got like 8 years left. He's 30, right? So, and there's not too many guys that are really in that gray area where they're like 33, 34. Like we basically right now have a lot of young, good quarterbacks, and then a lot of some older guys we'll get into shortly. Wide receiver is the easiest one to find these guys because the age apex for wide receiver is 26 to 29 years old, right? It's so easy to forget that the best wide receiver seasons are not usually by guys like Justin Jefferson that are 23, 24. You go and look at the best seasons all time, And there's more guys on that list that are 30 years old when they have their best season than there are guys that are Justin Jefferson's age. You look at Marvin Harrison Sr., his best season was at 30 years old. Randy Moss with the Patriots was 30 years old, right? Jerry Rice was 32. Jerry Rice tore his ACL at 34 and then had a bunch of 1,000-yard seasons. We shouldn't use Jerry Rice as the measuring stick or the litmus test for any of this, but these guys that are good wide receivers, that are stud wide receivers, can be good for a long time, right? The arguably number one wide receiver right now, Tyreek Hill, is 30 years old, right? And he's going on best ball drafts as wide receiver 2 or 3 off the board. So no signs of stopping there, right? So, and again, guys like Cooper Cup and we'll get into the old guys now, but Cooper Cup had his best season, when he was like 28, right? So we want to be in that age range for the age apex. So any of these guys that are already in your lineups every week now at 23, 24, 25, Chase, Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Olave, London, Waddle, like you just hang on to him. You just hang on to him. Unless you're somebody that thinks that like Puka Nacua, the first year was a fluke and the rug's going to get pulled, then maybe you take those guys and trade them. But that's different. That's different than saying I'm going to trade away Jamar Chase because I'm not going to win this year. That is a mistake. I've made that mistake. I took over a team once years ago, and I traded away Keenan Allen because I wanted to lose and I wanted to get a better draft pick. Right, I was blowing it up. But Keenan Allen, I traded him away, and I think I got Derrick Henry, who was young. This is how long ago it was. Derrick Henry hadn't even broken out yet. I got Derrick Henry in the draft pick, and it worked out okay. But like Keenan Allen is still good right now. We're talking like I made this trade 7 years ago. So you got to be very careful trading away guys like that are going to be good for now and for later, right? You have to picture where your team is now and where it's going to be, right? Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, they can start for you now and start for you later. Now, this next group, I'm going to categorize the win now players. And this group of players is important for everybody because if you're playing to win now, you want to get them. You want to load your lineup up with these type of guys, or at least have them on the bench as an option. Or if you're not playing to win now, you might want to sell them before the wheels fall off, right? That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is like, say you are on one of those rebuilding teams and you have all these young players and then you have one old guy and you don't want to trade that old guy away because you worry that all your young guys are going to be good all of a sudden and then now you're going to regret it. What ends up happening a lot of times is that's the one-way ticket to coming in 7th or 6th place, which is a nightmare, is that you have one good older player that wins you a bunch of matchups and your other guys aren't ready yet. And when you look at your team, if your team is mostly guys that are 22, 23 years old and you're not ready to compete now, what do you think is going to happen, right? The age apex for wide receivers from age 26 to 29. So say you got like a bunch of 22-year-old guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you think they're going to break out down the road. When those guys do break out at age 25, 26, if you're holding on to Travis Kelce, how old is he going to be at that age? When Jackson Smith and Jigba is 26, Travis Kelce is going to be 38, 39 years old. He's not going to be part of your team. He's not going to be part of that roster. That's why you got to decide with this group of players whether you can compete now or whether you can't, right? So for me, I'm looking around at we'll take tight end, for instance. If I'm playing to win now, the number one guy I'm targeting is Mark Andrews because personally for me, I look at him, he's 28 years old. Travis Kelce didn't have his first 1,000-yard season until he was 27. Zach Ertz didn't have his until he was 28. So I think Mark Andrews has a lot of good ball left. He could even be in the studs category at his age with the age apex for that position. But Mark Andrews at 28, and there are certain things. He's had some injury history. He's diabetic, which Jay Cutler had some issues with that. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not his doctor, so I can't definitively say that that's going to be a problem. Probably shouldn't even bring it up. But there is a world where he falls off within the next couple of years. But that's the number one guy I'm going for. If I'm playing to win now, Travis Kelce, Evan Engram, George Kittle, right? Those are the guys you go for. And if you are not in the position to win this year or next year, you got to trade Travis Kelce away. His brother just retired, man. He's talked about retiring. His girlfriend is a gazillionaire and runs the world. Like he doesn't need the money. He doesn't need to. I mean, of course that's not locked up yet, but like he's doing just fine. He's playing because as long as he thinks that he can play, be the best tight end in the league and win, he'll probably keep playing, but there's only so much you can do with that, and all it takes is one tough injury for these guys to sometimes say, hey, you know what? I'm hanging it up. I'm done. So Travis Kelsey, George Kittle, definitely in that category. Evan Ingram, probably more in the Mark Andrews group for me, especially full PPR and tight end premium. I think this guy can keep doing what he's doing, right, for a couple years now. So that's that group there. The other thing you need to know if you're win now, so those guys are guys you got to trade away if you're not playing to win. If you're win now in positions like tight end and quarterback, sometimes it's not that easy to get guys. Like you might have a star lineup at running back and wide receiver, and everything's looking great, but you have no shot at upside at tight end, and nobody's giving you Andrews. They're not giving you Laporta. They're not giving you McBride. Sometimes a win now team has to kind of scrap for the next best group of guys that they're not particularly old, or maybe they are old, like a Zach Ertz, but they have some sort of opportunity. You got to give yourself a shot at having a guy that's a top 2 target on the team, right? At tight end position, especially in Dynasty, it's such a top heavy format, right? The good teams are so good and the bad teams are so bad that you can't have any holes in your lineup. You have to give yourself a shot at having a guy that could be top 5 at tight end because the teams you're going up against in the playoffs are locked and loaded at every position, right? So for me, I look around and if I'm win now and I don't have a stud, I have to give myself a shot at that upside. So if maybe you throw a safe whatever guy in the lineup like a Dalton Schultz, boring, right? Dallas Goddard, but go out and look at guys like Pat Fryermuth or Hunter Henry or Juwan Johnson or Greg Dulcich or anybody that you think could be a top 2 target on their team. Give yourself a shot at upside, right? And Hunter Henry is a guy that people are, you don't have to pay anything for Hunter Henry. You get a look at Hunter Henry, and there's a possibility that that guy could have a big season this year. This isn't just going to be an all tight end show, and we're doing the yin and yang tight end as part of the draft guide, so you'll get all that info. But I'm just saying, if you're win now, you need to go out and get a stud. If you don't have a young player already, or go for Kelsey or Kittle or those guys, or if you're not winning now, trade those guys away. And again, a guy like Hunter Henry, if you're blowing it up and playing for the future, what the heck are you doing with Hunter Henry? Just liquidate him, cash out, right? There's really only 4 types of assets in Dynasty. There's young studs that are both young and good. There's old players that could crack your lineup. There's young players that haven't broke out yet that we want to stash. And then there's the guys that are never going to do anything from today forward. And those guys could be old, those guys could be young, but they're just never going to crack your lineup, right? And you just want to sell those guys for anything or drop them to waivers because if they're never going to crack your lineup, if you don't believe they will, then they're just clogging up your roster and they're preventing you from getting an older guy to help you win now or a younger guy to play for the future, right? So, and there's a lot of those guys out there. So, but anyway, same with wide receiver. The win now wide receivers are all those guys that are at or around 30 years old, and you either want to get them or you got to get them out. You got to get them out. Like there's obvious names: Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins. Those guys, 31, 32, 33, 34. They are this close to being Adam Thielen. There are a handful of guys that are Hall of Fame caliber players that continue to play at a high level at 35, 36, 37. You got to decide if you think your guy's a true like Hall of Famer, like a Larry Fitz or a Steve Smith Sr., right? These guys that play for a long time and are really good for a long time. Like, for instance, for me, I believe that Mike Evans is that caliber of player. I believe that there's nothing stopping Mike Evans from having 1,000 yards every season as long as he's healthy this year, next year, the year after. If you believe that, then those guys, for any situation, whether you're playing to win now or playing to win later, go grab them. But some of these other guys, I mean, like those guys I mentioned. Also, there's another group of guys like Cooper Kupp, right, who's had injuries, and anytime there's the rumors about retiring with Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill came out and he said that he only wants to play 3 more years. He said that last year, which mathematically we're talking only 2 more years. He's 30 years old, right? So if you're not in a position to win now, you might have to sell Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, right? DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley's 29. Calvin Ridley's 29 years old. If you're blowing your team up, and people think of Calvin Ridley as being young because he was an older prospect and he also had a full year off because he was suspended, so not really around. He feels young to us, but he's not. He's going to be 30 soon, right? So like guys like that, you have to figure out if you're going to win this year or next year, and if you're not, move on from guys like that. At running back, that's the running back is the position where it's easier to acquire older players and it's easier to trade them away as well. Like running back will always be the currency of dynasty fantasy football. That's the main currency. Because that gets all the deals done because it's so easy to take those guys and trade them for anything. Picks, tight ends, wide receivers, right? It's easy to take an old if your buddy is playing to win now, he's the best team in the league, and your team is young, it's so easy to trade a an older running back to that guy for picks for his picks or his younger wide receivers, right? So I personally, I'm usually the guy that's buying these guys because I play to win. You know, unless it's an extreme circumstance. Say I go to RT Sports or FFPC and I pick up an orphan team. If you go to either of those, you go to RT Sports, you use promo code Alarm. Or if I go to FFPC, I use promo code Coop. They give me $25 when I deposit 35 or more. If I go and pick up an orphan team and it's really gross, but there's a few pieces I like, then I'll play for the future. But for the most part, I play to win now because I'm trying to put my name on the trophy and the money in my pocket. Why are we playing, right? I see it in the NFL all the time. These teams that are just like wishy-washy and not going all in when they have the opportunity blows my mind because the only guys that win are Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, except for the teams that go all in, like the Rams going to get Matt Stafford, right? That's what needs to be your mentality in Dynasty. If you think you can win, go for it. If you don't think you can win, then you got to start selling pieces. But you should always be trending in one direction or the other. And in most cases, I'm going to be trending up because I'm good at this game and I'm constantly drafting players and trading forward and adding players off waivers that are good. And once I get an X amount of good players, I'm playing to win. So for me, I'm willing to go out and get Christian McCaffrey, even though today's his birthday and he just turned 28, right? We have to, I mean, people don't like to hear it, but Christian McCaffrey's 28. He's on the back end of the age apex, right? Joe Mixon turns 28 next month, towards the end of next month. And people are like, Joe Mixon's younger than Christian McCaffrey. I tweeted about it the other day and people lost their marbles, but it's true. So you have to factor that in. If your game plan is to win in a couple years, if your game plan isn't to win this year and you aren't sure if you can win next year, what's your plan? To win when Christian McCaffrey's 30 years old? Crazy. Crazy. You got to move him if you're not in it now. Derrick Henry, too obvious, right? Then there's guys that I'm going out and I'm getting full PPR. Give me Austin Eckler all day long. I look at Austin Eckler's situation, right, and what he's told us, straight up told us, is that he's going to play on pass downs and he's going to get the ball in space near the goal line, right? And he's going to use it's going to be the same rotation that they used with the Chargers, right? Back when he was at his best, when it was Melvin Gordon on early downs and it was Austin Eckler on pass downs. How do we know that? One, Austin Eckler told us. Two, the running back coach told us. And the running back coach for the Washington Commanders is Anthony Lynn, who was the head coach for the Chargers when they did that split. What do you think he told Austin Eckler when they convinced Austin Eckler to sign? He said, "Remember how we did it over there? Remember how nice that was? That's what we're going to do over here." So Brian Robinson Jr. is going to be on early downs, and he's going to be, probably fighting with goal line touches with Eckler and Jaden Daniels. So I'm out on Brian Robinson Jr., but in any sort of PPR, Austin Eckler, if I'm playing to win now, I'm going for it, right? I'm going for him. I'm going for Mixon. I'll even go for Nick Chubb or Aaron Jones. Nick Chubb is a tough one because if you're win now, the thing about Nick Chubb is that if you're win now and you believe in Nick Chubb, then you believe that you're going to make the playoffs regardless of whether you have Nick Chubb or not. And Nick Chubb is supposed to be back and ready to rock and roll by the time fantasy playoffs roll around. So Nick Chubb is a buy for me. It might be the only chance you have to get him, but you have to keep in mind, 20 years old. So if you're not competing to win now and you're not going to make the playoffs with the team you have, what are you doing holding on to Nick Chubb, right? You got to either be one side or the other. That's why this productive struggle business, it just never sat right with me because you're telling people it's okay to have a mediocre team, right? You either have a team where you're playing for later or you're playing for now. Scampers in the chat says, would you wait to trade away Diggs? His perceived value is pretty low on a crowded offense. Would you risk it falling farther for the chance that he performs well? We run into this problem a lot, the waiting game, both on guys that we think are going to blow up, guys that we think are going to get stuck, guys that we think are in weird situations. For me, If you believe in the player, go and get him now. If you don't believe in the situation, then sell him. Don't try and get too cute with this value situation. Because here's what could easily happen with this chart, with this Texans team, right? What the Texans want to do is run their version of the 49ers offense. Bobby Slowick brought that offense over. It's all he's ever known. That's why day one, they went out and got a fullback, Andrew Beck, right? And they just acquired Ben Skoronik, who also plays some fullback, because what the 49ers do is they use Trent Williams at left tackle and they use Kyle Juszczyk at fullback, and they have two stud wide receivers and a rock solid two-way tight end, right? That's what Bobby Slowick immediately did. They had Laramie Tunsil, who's a Pro Bowler, right? And then they went and got Andrew Beck and Bobby Skoronik, and then they used, Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Well, what ended up happening was Tank Dell, because he's, 5'8", 165 pounds or whatever. I'm not saying this is why it happened, but on a goal line set, he broke his leg, right? So what teams do when they get that criticism and those things happen is they go out and say, okay, well, how do we prevent this from happening? Both Nico Collins and Tank Dell got hurt last year. They didn't want to leave anything to chance. So they went and got another wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. So what's going to happen this year is I foresee Nico Collins being the big split end playing every single snap, the way Brandon Ayuk does. And Stephon Diggs is going to play slot for three wide receiver sets with Tank Dell out there. But when they go to two wide receiver sets, when the fullback comes in or when the tight end comes in and there's a jumbo set or a chance they're going to run, is that Tank Dell's going to come out of the game. So for the short term, I'm buying Stephon Diggs because I think he's going to be an every snap, every down player for the Texans. How Tank Dell would need to be incredible for them to make that trade and then turn to Stephon Diggs and say, hey, you got to be a part-time player for us because this guy over here is so good that we can't take him out of the game. Even when it's, we're at the 5-yard line and we're going jumbo, you're going to come out. And obviously Nico Collins is going to come out because he's 6'4", 220 pounds, and they just paid him a ton of money. So he's going to be out there tethering his foot to the line, split end. And then we're going to have you come out. Like, I just don't foresee that happening. So for me, Tank Dell is a guy that I'm not necessarily selling high because I believe in the talent, but I wouldn't be shocked if he had a similar season to what he had last year in terms of, not necessarily finishing with over 1,000 yards. If all three of those players are great and Dalton Schultz and Joe Mixon, then it doesn't matter who has any of those guys because whoever has CJ Stroud won the league. Because for all those guys to be relevant, you have to have like a 2013 Peyton Manning situation where he throws 55 touchdown passes and sets the record. But you be very careful with these offenses and the schemes. You have to know what they're doing because someone on that team has to play a partial snap share. So for me, I'm down to go in on Diggs. His va- his the I don't I always get a little long-winded on this stuff, but it's important to me. I like to get across what I actually mean. But with Stephon Diggs, if you believe in him, buy him now because if the season starts and he is a part-time player, not only will his value tank, but you don't want him. You're not going to want to have a part-time player, right? He Odell Beckham Jr. now is a part-time player, and he's going to be the part-time player for the Dolphins, who run the same offense. They use Alec Ingold as a fullback and the tight end, and they have Waddle and Tyreek Hill full-time players. So Odell's going to be the part-time player. If Diggs starts the season as a part-time player, you don't want to buy low because you know that role is bad, right? I'm buying now because I think he's going to be an every down player. So that's why I'm in on Diggs. And yes, Scampers, Taysom Hill never. Mods, get Scampers out of the chat. If I had seen that Taysom Hill comment before, I would have got you out of here. No Taysom Hill talk up in here. But yeah, get your questions in on any players that you guys that you're thinking about, whether it's worth buying, whether you should be selling, and where you're at with that. But so that's kind of the group of wide receivers, the groups of running backs I'm going for. And just like tight end with the Hunter Henrys and the Freiermuths and the Juwan Johnsons, if you're in a deeper league and you just need bodies to start for your team, you got to look around and potentially buy guys that are on the older edge that might not, be able to give you an RB1 or wide receiver one season. Like you're buying Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill because you think they can be wide receiver ones. But sometimes if you're competing now and you're thin at wide receiver, you got to go out and buy a Tyler Lockett, right? Like you got to go out and buy those guys uh that might just be bye week fill-ins or injury fill-ins that are on the older side because you got to win now and you don't want to leave anything to chance. I'm telling you, I've done it. I try. I've got one league that I've had the best team in the league for like the entire time we've had the league, and I've only won it once because I tried to straddle that line. I tried to fly too close to the sun. That's why this advice to me, I've made all the mistakes. I've been playing this game for since I was in 6th grade. I just turned 35, so I've been playing this game for 20 years. 20 years I've been playing this game. I've made every mistake you can think of. The first fantasy team I had, I just looked at the roster. I had at the end of the season, I had 3 kickers. And I had a Lindomari who was a monster. Like, I've made all the mistakes at every level to get to where I am now and to give you this advice. So I've made the mistakes, I've corrected the mistakes. Now I've got teams where I don't leave anything to chance and I keep winning. And oftentimes it's not as bad as you think it is when you go all in. Like, it's pretty easy to recover. You give up your picks, and then a couple years later, guess what? You got picks again. Look at the Rams. They gave up their picks. I tweeted about it earlier today. They gave up, oh, all these picks, they're all in, blah, blah. And then they won in 2021. And next year they only had 5 wins, and everyone's like, "See what happens?" And I'm like, "What happens? They won. They had a parade. Like, you know what I mean? It was the best thing ever. That's the best thing ever is winning the Super Bowl, and only one team gets to do it. There are 31 losers, right? And then look at them now. They got their picks back. They have all the picks. Like, all those picks are done. There's no more picks as part of the Stafford trade. They won 10 games last year. They went to the playoffs, right? They lost to the Lions, right? The whole plan was Rams win now, then Lions win later. They lost to the Lions by 1 point. Like, the Rams can beat the Lions at any given time still, right? That's what happens in Dynasty too. You go all in, and if you're good at this game, then you just keep making the right moves and the right trades and doing the right things, right? And the last thing I'll say on, well, let's hit on quarterbacks real quick. Again, guys like obvious guys, Kirk Cousins, Stafford, Rodgers. If you're in those 2 QBs and super flex leagues, sometimes you got to grab them and they're cheap, right? They could be in your lineup, right? The guy that I would compare to like Mark Andrews that I think is still young enough and still could be the QB1 or one of the top QBs is Dak Prescott, right? Like, he's 30 years old. He was QB3 last year, right? He's got CD Lamb. He's got some weapons, right? He could easily be a good quarterback. And then for me personally, in my super flex leagues, I go out and I buy any quarterback that I think is like I last year, Baker Mayfield's going to be starting quarterback. All right, cool. I'll grab him. Russell Wilson's going to start for the Steelers. Sure. Like, he could start. They were a playoff team last year. Russell Wilson could earn the starting job and start all season, and they could win playoff games. And Russell Wilson last year was the QB, what, 14 in points per game? He finished at QB 15 despite missing 2 games. Like, Russell Wilson on paper wasn't terrible. His contract was terrible, and he didn't fit the offense. And Joe Lombardi wanted to throw to the running back every single play, and they threw to the running back 156 times. But when you look at the numbers, I mean, the guy was top 5 in touchdown to interception ratio, right? Again, QB 14 in Superflex, he's in your lineup every week. So I'm in on Russ, Geno Smith, Derek Carr. Sometimes you got to buy those guys if you're playing to win now, just to have them, just especially in those two QB formats. The worst thing that can happen is you get to the middle of the season and one of your quarterbacks gets hurt, and now you're a win now team that has to overpay to get Russell Wilson. Go get him now. Go make those moves now so that you're ready. That you're ready to rock. You know. So that's what I'm doing. The other thing I want to mention to win now teams, if you're one of the best teams in the league, use that to your advantage as far as how you negotiate, who you approach, and how you talk to people. I wrote a whole article on this. It's up on Fantasy Alarm. It's called 3 Books for the Fantasy Trader. It talks about, a couple books, Never Split the Difference. It talks about um, The Art of War, right? And what you want to do is understand your opponent, understand what they want to do and what you want to do. Make 2 lists. This is what I do. I make 2 lists. I make lists of players that I will never give up and players that I want, right? And from there, I can give up anybody that's not on my list of players that I want to keep to get the players that I want. As long as I've not given up anyone from my keep players list, then I'll do that deal. That's how it works. That's the whole point of the book, Never Split the Difference, right? This guy, for anyone that hasn't read it, this guy was a hostage negotiator for the FBI, right? And was incredible at it. When he retired from that because, high stress, he went to business school at MIT and was part of these competitions, negotiation competitions with upcoming business professionals and professors and all these guys. A lot of them were it was like staged versions of what a negotiation might be like, right? You have your list of assets, and the whole goal of these competitions is to see if you can get as much from their list as you can without giving up your uh, with giving up as little assets as possible. And guess what? This guy mopped the floor with everyone. He mopped the floor with everyone, and he actually went on to become one of the best business negotiation consultants in the world, right? And how did he do that? Well, his philosophy was from the hostage world, right? And in that hostage world, you know that you can't split the difference with hostages. You can never go to the terrorists and say, okay, there's 20 hostages. Why don't you kill three and give me the other 17? That's not on the table. So he always kept that mindset with him that I need to get what I want and I can't give this up, but I will give up other stuff and I'll keep going around and round until I get what I want without giving anything up. And that's what he did. And he was so good at it that's now, people buy his book. I bought his book when I was doing real estate. And he coaches that, right? And in fantasy, you can do that. And and once you understand where they're coming from and where you're coming from, it's so easy for you to say, hey man, you're playing from the future. I like what you've done here with your roster. You've got a lot of these young assets. You're going to be winning. Me, I'm stuck with these older guys. I got to go all in now. I got to play to win now. I see that you have Alvin Kamara, right? What's it going to take for me to get him? I can't give up anything from my lineup, but I can give you guys, the younger guys and picks to help you later. I'll win now. You'll win later. That's what you sell those guys on. That's how you make these deals, right? And people like that. They appreciate that. They know that you're looking out for them. You're not just trying to take all their good players and rip them off, right? And do some lopsided trade and post it on Twitter and put a little black bar over the person's name, even though uh, we all know like who's in these leagues or whatever, and just try and hurt people's feelings like that. I hate that. I hate seeing that. You can do trades that help you and help them for the future. I like Michael Scott, snip, snap, snip, snap. Right? You can do trades that help them and help you. Right now, when you negotiate these trades, you obviously want to keep value in mind for yourself. Right, and if it works out in your favor on both ends, then even better. Right. So there's little things you can do. The number one thing that I like to do is when I go to do a trade and I'm a good team and they're the bad team, if I'm giving up a pick, I'll finagle it around to get one of their picks back, right? And the reason is obvious. My picks are because I'm good at this. My picks are going to be towards the back end of rounds. Their picks are going to be at the front end of rounds. 2 years ago, I was actually able to pull off a trade. I forget what the exact trade was, but I basically gave up my second round pick in a 12-team league for a player and a third round pick. I was able to get the third round pick thrown in to balance out the trade. But here's what happened. I came in first place. That guy came in last place. So my pick ended up being the 24th pick in the draft, the pick I traded away. His pick ended up being the 25th pick in the draft that I got back. So that player was essentially free, right? Those are little things that you can do that at the time make a lot of sense, right? Throw in a third, leaving it out. But when you think about the directions that the teams are going in, you can end up on top. And again, we're not trying to rip anybody off. That's not the goal here. If you do rip somebody off completely, they're never going to want to trade with you again. And your league mates are going to be mean to that person in the chat, and they're never going to want to trade with anybody, right? Fair trades is how you build. It's how you build that relationship. It's how you help both teams, and it's how you win. It's how you win. And if you have a really good fair trade, the other players in the league will hate it because they'll know that let's say you're on the other side of it and you're playing for the future, and the person you're trading with is playing to win now, they'll know that both teams got better and they'll hate it. That's how you know it's a really good trade in Dynasty when it almost seems like cheating. It all We do it in startups all the time. Like I'll go to my buddy and I'll say, hey, like 3 rounds in, when he has 3 wide receivers and I have 3 running backs, I'll say, hey man, looks like you're playing for the future. I'm playing to win now. How about you trade me your next round pick and I'll give you all my rookie picks and I'll win now, you'll win later. It looks like collusion. It looks like cheating. But in reality, that's how these leagues are supposed to work. You're supposed to try and win, and you're supposed to work with the teams that are on the other side of the cycle to kind of come to the middle and to meet at a level that makes sense for everybody, right? So that's where I'm at, and that's where I live on that kind of stuff. Then the last group of guys I want to talk about here, and again, if you guys want, can get into some players that I'm just getting rid of completely that I just don't want. Like for instance, Cole Kmet, he doesn't fit for me into. He's not a young stud, really. He's not a win now player. He's not a stash player, right? Like we stash him and think he's going to be good down the road. When DJ Moore's gone, when Roma Dunze's gone, when Shane Waldron's no longer the offensive coordinator and rotating Gerald Everett and Cole Kmet and Roma Dunze, and it's like when Keenan Allen, I mean, like when is Cole Kmet going to be a guy that has super high upside again? I don't know. So I'm just getting rid of him. But the guys you want to stash, to me, uh, at tight end, obvious, Isaiah Likely. Guys that just aren't, we trust the talent, but they don't have the opportunity. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, all these rookies, right? Like it's harder at tight end. Ben Sennett, though, he could end up behind Zach Ertz, right? So you're stashing these younger guys for the future. Um, it's tough at tight end because opportunity is so hard to come by. But usually we go for rookies. But yeah, Musgrave, Kraft, Likely, those are guys I'm all in on. At running back, you know the names, guys that are behind other backs. Like Jalen Warren is already 25, so he's kind of a tough one, but he still has standalone value. Zach Charbonnet has standalone value. Kendre Miller, right? Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell's 22 years old. So Derrick Henry's there now, but he's 30. Keaton Mitchell's 8 years younger. If you're playing for the future, go and get those guys. I wrote an article recently on 3 players that I'm definitely targeting at wide receiver. Uh, and again, I got to get through this quick. Unfortunately, it just started raining. My dog's outside, so I'm going to go and get that pup in a couple minutes. But for wide receiver, I'm looking at guys. Here's the trajectory I want. I want guys that I believe in the talent, but the opportunity or scheme is not there. And scheme does matter, right? Look at Mike Gesicki. This is a guy who, when he first came out, Brian Flores was the coach, and Brian Flores was using him like he was Jason Witten, blocking on 18% of his pass plays, hand in the dirt. He was terrible. He wasn't even in the top like 50 tight ends, right? Brian Gase gets fired, and um, then they bring in Brian. They bring in Brian Flores, and they bring in Chan Gailey, and they go and they use him at the slot, right? And they have him only blocking on 1% of his pass plays, and now he's tight end 6. That's entirely scheme related, right? And opportunity a lot of times based on who else is there, right? The example we like to use is Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin was a good player, second round pick. We love the talent, but he was stuck behind Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson. And then in year 3, Deshaun Jackson's gone. And now he can be an every down player playing in slot for 3 wide receiver sets and out wide for 2 wide receiver sets. And he goes berserk, right? That's the number one path. CeeDee Lamb is a rookie, 90% of his snaps in the slot. And then Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper are playing all the 2 wide snaps. As soon as he becomes an every down player, boom, wheels up, right? So I look at guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I believe in the talent, right? But they have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Go and get that guy now. Right now, because with this new offense with Ryan Grubb, he could be right away taking a little bump. And there it is, Kev Tompkins in the chat, filling out the bingo card. I if you want, I can say for your bingo card. Let's see. Every top 5 tight end has been top 2 on his team in targets since 2003. There you go, Tompkins. Bingo. Um, but anyway, Jack Smith and Jigba could be a full-time player. As soon as this year, if they go 3 wide receiver sets, but within the next couple of years, as Lockett fades out, he's going to be a full-time guy, and that's when he can have the upside to be one of the top guys out there, right? If you have Jaden Reed, right, or any of those Packers, I believe in them all, right? It's not a situation where you have to go through, and people do this on Twitter all the time. They basically say because you like Dontavian Wicks, you have to hate Romeo Dubs, right? Or because you like Christian Watson, you have to dislike Jaden Reed. That's not the case on a lot of these times. We've seen teams in the past, right? We saw the Steelers play against the Packers in the Super Bowl, and Antonio Brown hardly even played because Emmanuel Sanders and Mike Wallace and Antoine Randall and Hines Ward were all on the team. And on that Packers team on the other side, Jordy Nelson hadn't fully completely broken out yet because they had Donald Driver and they had Greg Jennings. Because you have a good young wide receiver doesn't mean the other wide receivers stink now, right? Like I like Romeo Dubs, I like Christian Watson, I like Dontavian Wicks, I like Jaden Reed, I like Luke Musgrave, I like Tucker Kraft, I like Bo Melton, I like Malik Heath, right? I like Josh Jacobs, and I like Marshawn Lloyd. And the beautiful thing is, if all those players are good, they cannot keep them all. They're going to have to pay these guys. They're going to have to pay Jordan Love, right? Some of those guys are going to move on. Some are going to stay. Just like Emmanuel Sanders moved on from the Steelers and he went to the Broncos. And guess what? Emmanuel Sanders was great on the Broncos and Antonio Brown was great on the Steelers. So you can stash all these guys. You can go out and get Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed, right? And then whoever gets the snaps this year is going to be the one that does well in redraft. Scampers, go grab Ty Montgomery. The funny thing is, I love Ty Montgomery because I drafted Ty Montgomery in a startup, and because I had Ty Montgomery, I took his handcuff, which ended up being Aaron Jones. So kind of really backdoored my way into a nice Aaron Jones pick there. Thank you, Ty Montgomery, for that one. Thank you for your service. But yeah, so Jaden Reed, all those guys. Josh Downs, a guy I like. If you think Josh Downs is just gonna be a slot guy forever, don't go get him. If you, like me, think that he has a possibility to be an every down player playing inside and outside at some point, right? Whether it's this year or next year or the year after, go get him. I see all these people that say, "Oh, Alec Pierce stinks," right? He led the league in routes run, but he was wide receiver 61. Or I don't Adonai Mitchell. I don't want any part of Adonai Mitchell in his late breakout. I see people say it all the time. They don't like these players. Well, what are you doing about it? Are you paying up for Michael Pittman? Are you getting Josh Downs? Are you stashing? You grabbing Jelani Woods? Right? Like, what are you doing about these opinions besides just being a jerk on Twitter? Like, put it into motion. Go and get these players. Go and get it done. Right? So JSN, Reed, Downs. There's a bunch of them. We talk. If you want more, hit me up on Discord. I'll give you a full list. For anyone that isn't on Discord, you got to get set up because this is only an hour show once a week where I just talk about ball, but we're talking about ball all the time, and you can ask me questions at any point over there on the Discord, fantasyalarm.com, all pro. It's 40% off right now. You get the best ball draft guide that's already available now. You get the draft guide when it comes out. You get all our guides for all our sports if you're an all pro membership: baseball, basketball, hockey, NASCAR. Our MMA guy, Micah Iannone, wins like every competition on DraftKings, right? So go get set up now. FantasyAlarm.com, all pro membership. It's the best, and I'll get you set up with Discord. It's great, and we do drafts every Wednesday, best ball drafts with the family. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, but for stashes, like go get picks, go get rookies, go get guys that other people are down on that are still young, right? We talked about scheme with Mike Gesicki. If scheme didn't matter, then why did Justin Herbert lose so much value? Right? Like the scheme changed. They want to run it a lot with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, and they move some wide receivers around as part of that. Like, go if you believe in Justin Herbert, go get him now, especially if you're playing for the future. Bryce Young, try and buy a guy like Bryce Young. And then I personally, if you got to look around and see who might have a shot that's still like 26, 25, 24. Justin Fields, Drew Lock, Sam Darnold, Sam Howell. Who are these guys that could be the next? I almost said Steve Young, who at 30 years old, he became the starter. Steve Young probably setting the bar a little high, but who could be the next Geno Smith, right? Like who could be the next guy that takes a turn as a backup and then comes back and gets paid $100 million, right? You know what? It happens. It happens sometimes. Drew Lock, Sam Darnold could get an opportunity as soon as this year. I straight up believe that Drew Lock is as good, if not better, than Daniel Jones. So he could be the starter there. But it is raining out. I got to go let the dog in. So we're going to call it here. Thank you guys so much for popping in. Thank you guys for supporting us and everything we do. If you can hit a like or subscribe on the YouTube, that is free. Costs you nothing. Really helps us out. And we're still going to do the Wednesday show, the live draft, everything. I got a bunch of shows where I'm doing guest spots or whatever. Might just even fire. Like if I have a reason to, I'll just do shows over the next 2 weeks. But my plan is to take the next 2 weeks off and really focus on the draft guide, make sure everything's good, ready to rock and roll for you guys. And then as we get into July and August, last year we had shows every single day, all 5 days a week at 1 o'clock. We'll see what we're going to do this year. But once July hits, man, it's all up and running. The Scott Fish Bowl is that's to me the kind of like official opening of redraft season. So that's why I wanted to do one last Dynasty show. Let you guys talk to you guys about the path, talk to you guys about trades, talk to you guys about who we like, who we don't like, how to navigate, answer any questions you might have. And then when we come back, it's all best ball, it's all redraft moving forward. So, and again, we have on the Discord, we have a channel that's just Dynasty. You can ask Dynasty questions anytime, all the time. Let's go. And appreciate you, Scampers. Yeah. Good weekend. Not so much a break. If you see the content in this draft guide, it's kind of the opposite of a break. It's kind of we need every hour of the day, all the manpower, every hour of the weekend to get this thing done and get it right and have the best possible information. The yin and yang tight end, that stuff takes hours and hours of research, right? To get to the point where we're comfortable in advising you on what direction to go. Because there's nothing worse than getting information or giving information when you're not informed. We take this very seriously, which is why we're going to take that little break and make sure that we crush it for all y'all. So, cheers, guys. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you guys on Wednesday. If you're in the Discord, let me know who's available for Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to post the draft probably this weekend to get everybody in there. All right.